Welcome back. Today we do a quick one on the Tripowin collaboration with ODB, I think is how you pronounce the name. This one is called Vivace. So Vivace has some pretty nice shells. I mean, I've seen something similar to this. I haven't actually seen this from Tripowin, but I think Tripowin, does pretty nice build quality. This is no different, kind of a resin bottom and kind of a resin filled faceplate. That one says Tripowin. I think this one has a logo. So, pretty nice. I think what's actually special about this set isn't so much the design or the shells, but I think you saw the first bit right there is it's got some really strong magnets and they tend to kind of attract and stick to each other. You don't see that every day. So I think the drivers actually are quite nice. And you see it right here, 10 millimeter titanium coated PET. You don't see that every day. I talked about a set yesterday, which was the I'm not even going to try to say that name again, but it was the Delta. So the Delta also had a titanium coated dynamic driver as well. So this will be another one, and I'll actually show you the graph, which you can kind of see there, and has a kind of a similar graph, and we'll talk about a lot of the differences between the two. So what is this one kind of right off the bat? I would say it's the collaboration set, and before we get into that, let me kind of point out the cable. This is the cable, it's kind of a nice black cable. I like black cables. You don't see black cables every day. It's always nice to get a black cable instead of an SPC sometimes. It looks like you got two sets of tips right there, all silicone tips. Lots of tips in the bag. I didn't actually use those, but that is a wide bore one right there. So, nice basic package. This one's about $29. So, nice cable for the price. Two sets of tips. I think all that is pretty reasonable for the price. So back to where I started there. What is it? Collaboration set with titanium coated PET dynamic driver. Like I said, I think that's a little bit special, something to point out right away. And going back to on the last set, I did like Delta. If you go back and read that review, I did like that set, particularly for its driver, particularly for its tuning on the same driver. Do we have the same thing here? And I would say that it's similar yet different. I think both drivers are actually quite nice, but Vivace is a little bit more, coincidentally, there's two V's in the name. The tuning is actually a little bit more V-shaped, so added a little bit more bass. And what's going to be a little bit harder to see on the graph, but in ear it's more noticeable, is that the treble is actually lifted compared to where Delta is. So this one, Vivace, is definitely more of a modern V-shaped style sound. It's actually very well done. It's kind of shocked me. I like the old V-shapes, but I also like the newer ones that are redone on modern dynamic drivers, done with a little bit more finesse to it, so don't actually bang up the 2K to crazy levels, but actually extend the V shape through the treble and spread out that peakiness so it ends up being lifted as opposed to peaky or bright. Exactly what they did on Vivace. So yeah, I would definitely call this one a more of a V-shaped, more bass, more treble, not the same relaxed sound that you had on Delta. But being more V-shaped, I think the stage did move a little bit more forward right in front of you. Less swirling around your head, less depth. I think all those things changed a little bit from Delta. I thought the stage on Delta was actually done quite well. And being more V-shaped, it is a little bit more energetic on both ends. Both are nice sets. They're just different flavors. Those of you who like V-shaped sets, you will definitely get along really well with Vivace. It's a really nice version of a V-shaped set that I haven't heard in a while. And there's been a couple of them in 2024. This is actually done pretty well. So the sound, as I said, a nice modern V shape, especially the treble. Could have gone more energetic, but it brings clarity and balance to the added bass. Again, executed on a nice driver, and that has some bite to it versus the softer Delta. And I think that was one of the things that I talked about with Delta, is it has this nice, warm, smooth sound to it. Vivace has a little bit more of a bite to it because where they raised the treble. But yeah, I'll say that, coming from a reviewer who came out of Korea, I actually assumed that we would see a really energetic 2K, like those female vocals brought really forward, really over energetic, and you can kind of see it's exactly almost where Delta is. Very, very well done. It was unexpected, and when you hear how the level is kind of slightly ticked across the whole treble range, again, I kind of give him props. I give Tripowin props for putting out a V-shaped style set in his style at a price that people can try and figure out whether they like these V-shaped sets. They like the energy at both ends, that engagement, that fun they get on V-shaped sets. That's why I started listening to V-shaped sets a long time ago. But to hear them done so that there's no shoutiness here is a really important thing. And it looks like a small thing, right? I have a big arrow, I have an arrow there. But that's really what I'm really pointing at there, is that this non-shouty upper mid ear gain area was a really, really brilliant move. And still having the V-shaped signature where you have enough treble lift and you have a bass lift and they both kind of lay on top of each other the way V-shapes should. And, really, really well done. And again, the graph doesn't really do its justice to the tuning that he did and the sound that he got, and it probably fits really well for the music that he listens to. So again, kind of props to both Tripowin and ODB for really putting this one together. It's pretty cool. So the bass, to be fair, my personal preference is closer to Delta. I think I like the lower bass shelf, but this one was actually done quite well, and I do like his commitment to more bass, and I do like the level that he chose on this particular driver and matching with the treble level that he picked. I think all those things were still done quite well. Still no boom, as I said on Delta. That was a big thing on Delta. There's no really boominess to the sub bass. This one just carries in a little bit more bass into the mids or behind the mids. More bass, more fun, and a corresponding tick up in the treble, so you have the balance, and that's sort of the V-shaped sound and how Vivace is slightly different than Delta. So because the treble isn't overly boosted, there will be some latitude on tip rolling here to add or remove bass. This isn't a set that really needs all the bass for balance. So again, you look at it. Some sets have a ton of bass and a ton of treble. This one has a tick up in the bass, and then the treble is actually kind of relaxed. So if you're into tip rolling and you have tips that bring down the bass a little bit, you don't have to worry about this becoming so overly bright that it's out of balance. You will have some latitude. And again, this is kind of one of these small minor points that it's really cool to actually see it done well and to be done on a set, and how brilliant again this move was to not raise this up so it was super shouty, and then you wouldn't have the latitude to get any kind of bass adjustment through tip rolling. So yeah, really cool. So the mids, again, where Delta had a full sound, kind of that warm, smooth, full sounding mids, Vivace is definitely closer to a traditional V, slightly behind the bass, slightly behind the treble. The treble boost layers on top for clarity, exactly how a V-shape should sound. You have this kind of this foundational of bass, which is the bottom part, and then you have this layer of clarity and energy and treble that sits on top, and the two kind of make a nice sandwich, and that's how V-shaped sets are meant to sound. That's exactly how this one sounds, so got all that right. And Delta, I would say Delta was more about revealing the mids as opposed to this V-shaped set where you're kind of pushing them forward. Delta was a little bit more revealing because it had lower bass and lower treble, and the two work together to kind of reveal what is there, as opposed to pushing the bass a little bit forward and then pushing the treble forward so the mids become forward as you get on a V-shaped set. So where I said Delta needs to be a tick up in volume to come forward, that's not the case on Vivace. The vocals are already forward. Upping the volume here does a traditional V where you get some bass boost but more treble, so not quite bass head tilted style. So as I said, if you just look at the graph and you see this bass is kind of tilted a little bit above where the upper mids are in the ear gain area, you might make the assumption that you turn up the volume and you get more bass than you get on treble. Not quite in this case. And again, I said the graph is going to be a little bit deceiving in this case. It actually looks, or in ear, it sounds a little bit more lifted than it is on the graph. So it ends up kind of raising volume, kind of comes up, pretty much as you would expect a V-shaped set to come up, both sides, as opposed to more of a bass boost that you get on some bass head style where you see that the bass is higher level than the upper mids, but this one is pretty much going to be in balance in that way. So the treble, and looking at the graph, you'd assume be really close to Delta. As I said, it's deceiving, but the balance is very different. Vivace is more forward in the lower, slightly boosted in the upper, so it's still heard. More of a vocal-centric tuning versus what I said about Delta, that seamless upper treble to the upper mid, the treble, the upper smooth roll in, doesn't quite do that. Vivace has more of an emphasis on the lower. So again, I'm talking about this area and the way this balance is slightly different than Delta. Delta is kind of exactly what you want in that style. You don't have a huge bass boost, you don't have a treble boost, so this whole thing sounds very seamless. And as you listen to the vocals, you get a really nice seamless transition all the way through the upper treble and through air. All that is heard, and there's no peakiness in the way. There's no real off balance in it. So when you do a V-shaped set, it's slightly different because you have an emphasis here right in the vocals, and then that is pushed a little bit forward. So then you have to push the upper treble a little bit forward, and that's kind of that second arrow. So yeah, there's kind of slightly two different boosts there, and that is just slightly different than the way that Delta did it. Again, neither of these are better or worse. It's just a slightly different style. Some people are going to really appreciate the V-shaped set, more bass, a little bit more treble, and the way it's boosted forward. That is just different than the way Delta will be too relaxed for some people, and then they'll pretty much get along with Vivace in that way. So the stage, again, as I said, increase the treble. Forward vocals tend to flatten the stage, kind of exactly what happens on Vivace. The sub-bass control over here, kind of exactly should work. It doesn't mask the air the way it's done here, and there's still a sense of space, just not the depth and dimension on Delta. So as I said, the stage on Vivace is going to be a little bit different because this was brought forward. That tends to flatten it, kind of pushes you right in front of your face a little bit. It kind of flattens in front of you, whereas Delta was more of a around your head, projected, swirling kind of thing. So again, just a slightly different flavor of stage that some people will notice, some people will not notice. I just happen to notice those things. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.